Now we're recording.
Uh-huh.
Welcome in.
That's my only job.
That's right. The podcast is going to get a little bit of a chop there. So let me say hello again to everybody. I forgot to hit record up front. Hello, everybody. Welcome into another Jew and Gentile podcast. We've got a great show lined up for you. Hey, you know where we are? We are in our new studio, Steve.
Well, we're in our new place where we do podcasts.
That's right.
I'm reluctant to call it a studio.
That's exactly right. It's our podcast room.
That is correct.
I apologize. It's our podcast room. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We got a great show lined up for you. We're going to be continuing our study in the book of Ruth. But, Steve, before we get to all of the fun stuff, why don't you tell us where you've been? You've been traveling a little bit. You've been traveling a lot lately, actually.
Oh, yeah, a little bit. I was at a pastor's conference, a group of Bible churches in a rural area right on the tri-state area of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland. And I have to tell you, the Lord taught me a lesson, Chris. I have to say that I was reluctant at a camp to wear a tie. I just didn't want to do it.
Well, camp and tie don't necessarily sound like something that they go together, you know?
And I asked the person who was in charge, I want to be proper, what's the attire? And he said, we don't have a special attire. We leave it up to the individual. But he said, I can only tell you that every speaker is going to have a tie on. And I said, oh, man, at camp. So to myself, well, the Lord taught me a lesson, Chris. I'm coming out of Chili's on Sunday, and I'm with the couple who were gracious enough to host me, and I'm coming out, and a man comes up to me and says, oh, wait, stop. I want to shake your hand. So I said, oh, okay. And so he said, I see you're wearing a tie. I know you were at church. He said, you're at church. We know that you're not going to the mall.
With a tie on.
That's right. And so I looked up and said, Lord, I'm sorry. I reminded myself my own people were in the book of Exodus complaining, and I was complaining in my heart just over a tie, and a guy said, my name is J.T. King, and he had a tie.
You remember his name, too.
Well, because I said, oh, who am I shaking hands with? He said, my name is J.T. King. He said it I said, whoa, okay. Well, I'm Steve.
But you had a great time at that camp. You talked all
fabulous.
Prophecy.
We talked Third Temple.
Wow.
Temple. The ashes of the red heifer. Are they importing stones from Indiana for the temple? Of course, that's not true, but there were rumors. Do they have the ashes of the red heifer? How many temples are there? When are they going to be rebuilt? Do we have to have a temple in order for the tribulation to begin? All these kinds of questions. It was wonderful. We had a great time.
And you're also getting ready in tomorrow or Friday?
Tomorrow.
You're going to Israel.
No, actually Friday. Today's Wednesday. I'm kind of messed up because we normally do our podcast on Thursday.
That's right.
And today is Wednesday. So it is Friday. I'm taking off from being in the office. That's why we're podcasting today. And leaving Friday, Chris. What a time it's going to be.
You're going to have a great time. You know, I was talking with a colleague who's going to Israel with you all, and he was just saying how much he's looking forward to. It's probably not that busy in Israel right now, so you're going to almost have some of these sites to yourself, which, you know, over the years, up till 2019, I remember going over and feeling like you're crammed in. There's so many tourists coming to Israel, and it really, I think 2019 was a peak year for Israeli tourism.
4.5 million people in 2019.
And you felt it when you were in Jerusalem, and you felt
100%.
it when you were at Caesarea, and you felt it when you were at Sea of Galilee. And now it's picking back up again, but you're kind of getting that. You'll have it'll be a little more quiet, it seems like.
Chris, it's like me getting up in the morning. You know, when I get up in the morning, oh, man, this hurts and that hurts, and I start real slow. Well, going back to Israel, and in fact, tourism in Israel is kind of like being an old man.
Yeah.
It's going to be a few people. It's going to be slow. But once I get going and everything's kind of lubricated a little bit, you're moving around, I think that's the way it's going to be. It's going to come back, but it's going to take a little bit of time.
It's going to be a great trip, I think, Steve. I think it's going to be a good time for you and everybody. And I know our executive director, Dr. Jim Showers, has been very anxious to get back to Israel. It's been too long for him.
And Chris, you and I are going to podcast. I don't know. You're going to figure it out. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I just know I'm going to get on my computer and I'm going to talk to you, and it's somehow going to be on. We're going to be doing Ruth chapter 4.
That's right.
From Israel.
I'm going to pipe you right in. It's going to be like you're sitting across the table from me. It's going to be great.
I'll miss you, Chris, but I will say Jerusalem, Chris. Jerusalem, Chris.
I totally understand. I feel no ill will toward that statement whatsoever.
It's from good to great. You're good. Israel's great.
That's right. Well, why don't we do Ruth chapter 4? Steve, Ruth chapter 3. And Steve, as you're going there, I just want to remind our listeners that currently we are in our FOI Equip class, Antisemitism, Past, Present, and Future. Ty Perry is teaching it. It's just a fresh reminder, too, that this whole podcast, the Jew and Gentile podcast, is sponsored by FOI Equip. All of this is designed that, number one, you can enjoy the conversation that Steve and I have.
That's one way to describe it.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I mean, it's always fun for me, you know. I hope it's fun for our listeners. But also to remind you that on Thursday nights, you can join a free live online class, and we have so many options now available. On Thursday night, tomorrow night, Ty Perry's going to be wrapping up a 3-week series that he's been doing on anti-Semitism, past, present, and future. You can still register it and catch the last class. I promise you it'll be worth your while. You can register by going to FOI, as in Friends of Israel, FOI Equip .org. You'll find his class there. And then also I want to encourage you to go to foiequip.org, because there you can register for our upcoming spring feast classes that's going to be taught by Cameron Joyner. He's going to be spending 2 weeks talking about Passover, unleavened bread, the Feast of Weeks, Shavuot, all these great spring feasts from the book of Leviticus, what they mean to, what they meant for the Israelites, what they meant for Jesus in his time, and what they mean for us today as well.
But not only that, Chris, I'd like you to tell them, if they go to foiequip.org, they don't only have to register. I mean, they can register. We want them to register. It's a great place to register. But there are little tags at the top, and they could go back to all the other classes. There's videos from YouTube. There's recorded Equip classes as well. And they can have their pick of whatever interests them. Aren't I right?
All of our classes are recorded and stuck on YouTube, and you can go back if you're interested in wanting to see Steve's class that he did on the fall feast of Israel, or you want to listen to how the significance of Hanukkah, the story of Hanukkah. We have so many classes right now built out for you to just go log on to YouTube, and you'll be able to watch them all. They're all available for you, and you can find access to that by going to foiequip.org.
I just found that's a relatively new site that just happened a few weeks ago, and I find when I go on there, it's so easy to access all the other things. So yes, it's the place to register, but also a place to get older material that could be relevant, including the Jew and the Gentile podcast.
You can go and listen to the Jew and Gentile podcast right at foiequip.org. Go there, people. Go there. Hey, so Steve, we're talking about Ruth, and can I just say before we get into Ruth chapter 3, this is a transitional book of the Bible. This is transitional in the sense that we're transitioning from Ruth or from the point in the time period of the Judges. And Ruth is this 4-chapter book that's kind of the bridge between how God was using the Judges to correct Israel's waywardness, if you will, to the period of the Kings. And so that becomes important because now all of a sudden we're talking about Ruth building this bridge between Judges, and then we're going to see at the very end of chapter 4 of Ruth that it's leading us to the kings of Israel, a different way that God is going to speak to his people and connect with his people. And so this is a nice bridge book, and we're in the middle of this story now. It's a love story, as you were talking about, Steve.
It is a love story. And it's a story that's a redemptive story, and it's a story that is on the harvest. It's a story that we get to see the kinsman redeemer. And Chris, sometimes it's hard for people, including me. You say, I read the Old Testament, and okay, I know it happened. There are historical people that are important, but how's this relate to me? Kinsman Redeemer, it really is going to relate to us. It relates to the ongoing story of the Bible, following the seed of Genesis chapter 3, to the monarchy that you just described, and we're going to see the joy of dating.
Biblical dating, right?
Biblical dating. It is a love story, and it puts a smile. At least it puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, and that's why we're kind of in the middle of this love story now, because chapter 1 sets up the tension, or sets up the dilemma. The dilemma in chapter 1 is that Ruth and Naomi lost their husbands. Naomi is Ruth's mother-in-law. They lost their husbands. There was bitterness, there was sadness over the situation, and this was an opportunity for Ruth to break away from her mother-in-law and to go do what she needed to do to survive, and she didn't. She stuck with Naomi, which you could almost say could almost become like an anchor, not something that could propel her into life, but now she's following a woman there's no hope in, if by Ruth staying with Naomi, it only kind of, it could have set her up for disaster and not success. But yet she stayed faithful to her. Chapter 2 sets up the love story between Boaz and Ruth, and there's that kind of love tension that's there. We're getting that, part of the movie where you're getting the butterflies. And now we're moving into like a serious moment where I guess they have a kind of a conversation about where they stand with one another in Ruth chapter 3.
It is amazing. And I don't think we should be afraid here. Ruth converted. That conversion, she left her pagan culture because of Naomi's testimony, even though Naomi felt she was now Mara, bitter. And she said, your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. I'm going with you, no matter how hard it gets. She was forsaking the old life and venturing on to the new. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we should be scared of that word. From my background, the word conversion is a real negative word. But here we can see the actual definition. Ruth left what she knew to follow the God of Naomi. And it's a great story.
I don't mean to segue here, but I'm interested in your thoughts on the word conversion when it comes to maybe like a Jewish person when it comes to Jesus. Is it a conversion or is it, Jesus is Jewish? How does that play? It's not like we're asking them to jump ship and, become a Muslim or become, sometimes I think we forget our roots are firmly planted in the Jewishness of the Bible. In Jesus is Jewish. It's not like, so do you see where I'm going with this?
Absolutely.
Conversion.
And
is that a right
I really
word?
appreciate the question. It takes me back in my mind because my presupposition, anybody that would become a Christian, and I heard about it back when I was growing up, but that was a terrible thing, a shanda. Mm-hmm. We use that Yiddish word, a terrible thing, that they would forsake their background. Well, Chris, when I first was confronted through the ministry of Friends of Israel, I realized very quickly they weren't asking me to forsake my background. In fact, the people at the Bible study for Friends of Israel, they wanted to learn about the Jewish people. They wanted to know about Jesus' Jewish background, and instead of forsaking it, they would talk. Back then, the talk was, you complete being Jewish. You found the fulfillment of being Jewish. You embrace who you are, and I can say honestly that I'm more interested in Jewish things as a believer than I was as a young 22-year-old before I was a believer.
Because Jesus brings the fulfillment of all those things, the true meaning of them.
And almost every Jewish believer that you talk to, and Jewish people who see other Jewish believers say, you know what? I understand you embraced it. And they will say, I know it was said of you, Chris. You've met Jewish people, and they said to you, Chris, you're more Jewish than I am.
Yes.
Why is that?
Yes.
Because we're interested in the Jewish Messiah.
That's exactly right. And the Jewish Messiah brings the full, what's the word I'm thinking of? He enhances the idea of what it means to understand the Jewishness of the Bible.
He
completes it. That's exactly right. And so that's why I was wondering the word conversion. It's hard to, it's one thing when a Gentile pagan or, converts to Christianity.
She forsook.
That's right.
Everything.
She was a Moabite.
Hey, you just said I taught for Equip I taught my own Jewish feasts.
That's right.
Hanukkah, we celebrate Hanukkah. You and I celebrated Purim.
That's right.
Right on the Jew and the Gentile podcast. So, no, we embrace those things because God, through the Lord Jesus Christ, has completed what he started.
That's right. So Ruth chapter 3, Naomi is involved here, Steve. So it says,
that's right.
She says, it says in verse 1, one day Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be well provided for." So again, she cares about Ruth's welfare. I can't stress this enough. I've said it over and over as we've been studying Ruth, the Jew and the Gentile, studying the Jew and the Gentile, Ruth and Naomi. It's welfare. And she has welfare for her daughter-in-law, and she wants to make sure that her daughter-in-law is taken care of because her daughter-in-law forsook, a lot to follow her back to Bethlehem.
Well, listen, in a Yiddish accent, she'd say, "Look, darling, I'm going to help you. I want to take care of you. I love you. And so just listen to me. Just listen to me, and you'll be okay." It's true, and it was true.
Yeah, and that's when she said to her, "My daughter, I must find you a home for you, for where you will be well provided for." Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours.
Of course he is.
That's right. Bada bing, bada boom. And tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. I love this. This is perfect. Wash. Put on some perfume and get dressed in your best clothes.
A little makeup, it won't hurt.
That's right. It's right out of a television show.
Absolutely.
Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know that you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He'll tell you what to do.
Well, Chris, let's make sure that we are clear. This is a cultural practice. It sounds kind of weird,
sketchy.
It's sketchy, and would we in 21st century want our daughters to do this practice? It carries with it stuff that we're not familiar with. But back then, this was perfectly respectable.
Yeah, this is a very normal way of we call it dating, but this was the way that I guess a woman showed interest in a man, and a man would respond, and it's interesting because, men typically are told in our culture, you go and you go, tell the woman that, hey, would you like to go on a date? Or, I hear these stories today of, kids texting. Hey, you want to go out with me? I'm texting. I mean, I wish I had it that easy, face to face. You have intimidation, you have to feel that feeling of rejection. Well, here it seems like it's flipped, that the woman is going to Boaz and saying, hey, I hear we're relatives. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole purpose here, raising up seed to Naomi's husband and her sons. So that this seed comes through Naomi, and this tradition or this culture, this practice was a normal practice. And Naomi told her, he'll know what to do.
Yeah.
At the right time, he'll know exactly what to do.
So that's what happens. It says, "I will do whatever you say." And Ruth answered. So she went to the threshing floor and did everything that her mother-in-law told her to do. And when Boaz had finished eating and drinking, and was in good spirits. So he's feeling good.
Give him a lot of carbs that makes him kind of sleepy.
That's right.
A way to a man's heart's through his stomach.
He's feeling good. He's worked a hard day. He went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and laid down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Who are you?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to get some rest
where
here.
Where am I? What is going on here?
That's right. My mother-in-law sent me. That's
right. Man.
So what, Steve, there's a lot of cultural significance to this, but the idea is that there is some pursuing going on here, and Boaz appreciates it. That's the big point.
In fact, he says so, Chris. In verse 10, he said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich." He must have been older, and now he knows this practice. He's saying, man, you're at my feet. You're you're interested in me. This is amazing. And so he said, you could have gone after younger men, but you went after me. And now, my daughter, don't fear. Everything's going to be fine. Just like Naomi thought.
Yes.
She gave her the instructions. I will do for you all that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. So important that the Holy Spirit put this in because of the culture we live in. This was a virtuous thing to do.
And again, the idea that the town already knew, I don't think she's been there for a long time, but the town already had an idea that, Ruth is somebody different. She's a Moabite, of course, but she's virtuous, and she loved her mother-in-law and stayed faithful to her mother-in-law. And so they all knew that. And so that also landed with Boaz.
Well, I think they noticed Boaz was making sure in chapter 2 that, she was taken care of from the gleaning.
Yes.
And so, hey, make sure you leave a little extra there for her. So you could see just the beginning to birth, and now it's becoming even stronger.
He goes on, he says, although it is true that I am the guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. So this becomes some tension for us in the story of Ruth as well.
That's right. Somebody else had a shot.
That's right, because there's some love. You technically didn't have to love the person to enter into this marital relationship. Remember, this was the welfare system. This woman lost everything. God provided a way for her to marry the next in line, a brother, a kinsman, a family member that's closest to the person, to her husband, to keep her safe, to keep her protected, cared for, as Naomi was saying.
He had a purchase. There had to be he had to have the ability to take care of her. There was a purchase price, if you will.
But that closest kinsman had to cancel that, essentially, because a part of the law was it had to go to him first. And so there's some tension here. It's not as easy as we want it to be.
Not at all. There's a chance that the other person will say, hey, I see Ruth too. I'm interested. And then Boaz would have had to step aside, even though the two of them, it seemed, had eyes for each other. That doesn't matter. The law trumps the emotion here.
Yes. And so you can also see, which I think is really interesting, is to see how the law does play out in culture. The law does work its way out where they could go, let's just get married. Let's skip all the details, the technicalities of the law, but that they were still willing to fulfill what the law said and to wait out the tension that was there, because there is essentially love going on here. It's not just a relationship of convenience. It's love that we're seeing that's being played out. And so it says, stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you.
Can't you hear the Israeli? If he wants to do what he has to do, good. We had Zvi Zvi was our a longtime family of friends of Israel. And to hear Zvi talk was so typically Israeli. Good. I could almost. So Boaz said, "Look, if he is the near kinsman and he wants you, good. But if not, I'm in."
Yeah, and it says, "But if he's not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until the morning."
That's what I said. He's in.
Yeah, he's in. So she laid at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized, and she said, "No one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor." So she sneaks out, and he did put some food in her bag for her because of the care that he has for her. But then it says, when Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go?"
So what's new?
That's right. How did it go for you? And then she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley," saying, "Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Take care of your mother-in-law." And then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." I love that.
I do too. And the translation that I have, Chris, it's just an interesting nuance. It says, "Sit still, my daughter." And, I thought about that. There's a couple other instances. There's stand still and see what the Lord will do in Exodus. And then there's be still in Psalm 46 and verse 10. Be still and know that I'm God. Here, Ruth is told, sit still until you know how the matter will turn out. Waiting is hard, Chris, at least for me. Waiting sometimes is the most productive thing you could do. Wait and see. Sit still, wait it out, but it's hard. Patience is a hard thing.
Patience is very hard. And I was just thinking because what does the NKJV say there?
It says, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out, for the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day.
Because I don't know about you, but my personality, I can't sit still. I am not a sit still kind of guy. I am always, if I'm thinking it, I can do it. I can get it done. Just give me the opportunity, give me the tools. I'll make the tools if I have to get this thing moving. And so, but there is that element, like you said, it almost speaks right to our heart, where here's a serious moment. Here is love. Here is potential marriage. And this isn't just, like I said, a marriage of convenience. This is a marriage that is built on two people who could love one another, and she has to wait now. And it speaks to me because God's asking us to wait.
Sometimes when we don't wait, we need to hear, be anxious for nothing.
Yeah.
That's what the New Testament says. Here, sit still, wait, be patient, wait upon the Lord. Those are the harder things. But here, it's really ends up being a blessing, because we do have this kinsman redeemer law being played out. And she's got to watch it play out.
Yeah, she has to see what God's going to do.
And now what is she going to do?
Yep.
Well, we already know, but still, what's she going to do?
Yeah, you can read ahead and find out if you've not read Ruth, but we're ending Ruth chapter 3. A great reminder for us, as Steve said, to be still and know that I am God. I don't know what you're waiting for right now. Maybe you're listening and maybe you're waiting for something. Maybe you're waiting for an answer from God about something. Maybe you're waiting, you've been waiting for a long time. Maybe you feel like you're in the wilderness waiting. But this is a good reminder that doesn't mean God doesn't care. Sometimes I think when we're waiting, we're wondering if God's listening to us, and he is listening to us, and he does have a plan. And so it's just a reminder in Ruth that we have to wait on the Lord for his good timing.
100%. And be still, stand still, and sit still. Those are 3 commands we get in the Older Testament text.
That's right. And it doesn't mean you're being lazy. It means you're waiting on the Lord.
Waiting on the Lord.
All right, well, Steve, that was great. We're going to continue our study, our final chapter 4 from Israel.
I am looking forward to it, Chris.
That is going to, I don't know where you're going to be. Do you know where you'll be next Wednesday?
I haven't looked it up. It doesn't matter. There's a difference in time. I'll probably be in the hotel after a long day, and you'll probably be here and in the afternoon. I think it's about a 7-hour difference in time from East Coast.
I'm guessing you're either going to be in Galilee next week. We'll find out next week, but you'll either be in Galilee or you're going to be down in the Dead Sea.
Sit still and wait.
Well, I'm wondering, it would be fun to end this thing if you're near Bethlehem. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I didn't.
If you're in Jerusalem, you're only 5 miles from Bethlehem.
Guess what? Israel's the size of Israel. You're never too far from anything.
All right, Steve, we've got some news for everybody. Why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Well, I'll get us started with some sad news. Assailant kills 4 in stabbing attack in Beersheba, Israel. And this, of course, is a terrorist attack. We haven't heard much of that for a while.
No.
It's unfortunate that we hear it now. The attacker hit a cyclist with his car, killing the cyclist, exited the car at the mall, and stabbed 3 people to death before being shot to death by a bus driver. I guess the good news in Israel is having a gun is not uncommon. Somebody in the area, it could be an army, a person in the IDF, because they're walking around the streets in Israel, and the gun is an appendage to them. Mm-hmm. It could be a bus driver, and many bus drivers, if not all of them, carry a gun. And in this case, unfortunately, 4 people died, but he was stopped quickly.
Yeah. It's important to remember, too, Steve, when we talk about guns, it's not like people just get guns in Israel. They actually have very strict gun laws there.
They do.
But they're capable, like you said, it's different than us, because we don't see our military with their guns around their chest, walking around or waiting at the bus station to go home or whatever, because they have to carry their guns with them everywhere.
It's an appendage.
Yeah.
If they get fined or get sent to the brink without it.
That's right.
Yeah, they're in big trouble.
But this is big because we've not heard anything about major acts of terrorism. You know, I know that there are stabbings that take place in Jerusalem occasionally. You know, but this in Beersheba, this is a big one too, because Beersheba is a very Jewish city as well. Yep. So it's not where a lot of mixing between the Palestinian community and the Israeli community take place, like in Jerusalem. That's kind of a melting pot of all the different Israeli cultures. Where here, you know, this is a little bit different. But Steve, it looks like you want to say something here.
That's right. The Jerusalem Post said this was the third stabbing in a week.
In Beersheba. Or in Israel?
It wasn't specific, but it just said the Jerusalem Post reported that this was the third stabbing attack in Israel. So It's in Israel.
Yeah, you know, you're going to Israel.
Oh, I'm not worried at all.
So talk about that.
No, I'm not worried at all. Hey, I ministered for 18 years in Chicago. The first trip I went to, I came back. More people died over the weekend in Chicago. I'm listening to the news when I got back from Israel. 15 people were shot in Chicago, and there wasn't any of that kind of thing. I know there's terrorist acts that take place, but the crime rate, the murder rate is very, very low. These kinds of things happen, but no, it's more dangerous in Chicago, San Francisco, L.A., Philadelphia. Chris, we live outside of Philadelphia. We're in New Jersey as the crow flies, 15 minutes from downtown, and how many murders take place in Philadelphia?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, it's the worst it's been in several years. One time I think I've told you this story. We had a Israeli tour guide that actually is going to be leading your tour, Tito Andejar. And the church I was going to in Dallas flew him and his family to America.
What a trip.
And he had never been before. He's born and raised in Morocco, immigrated to Israel, I think in the early 70s, and has been a tour guide for many years, a fantastic tour guide. And so, you know, when I say, hey, the church wants to fly you and your family to America, and you can do something on the Sunday morning and a Sunday evening, and he was very excited. And so he sits down, he tells me this story, he sits down with his tour guide buddies, drinking a cup of coffee, and he says, you'll never believe it. This church is paying for me and my wife and my 2 boys to come to America. I'm going to go to New York City. I'm going to go to Dallas, Texas. And all the tour guides go, are you sure you want to go right now? It's kind of dangerous over there, you know? And it was just one of those moments where I hear it all the time. Is it safe to go to Israel? And they're going, is it safe to go to America? You know, that goes through their mind as well. So I think it was just around the time of the Boston Marathon bombing. So it's fresh on their mind. You know,
stuff happens. It's true. But Israel, and I would say this to our listeners who are believers in Jesus Christ, you are immortal until the Lord calls you home.
That's a good point.
He doesn't care where you're he knows when your time will come, but it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in the middle of Ukraine with a war going on. If it's not the time for you to go home, the Lord, you're going to survive. Not even a problem. So at the same time, you could be in what you think the safest place is. What happened in, I think it's 1st or 2nd Samuel, the king, no, it must be in Kings, because it's after David and Solomon. It was Solomon's son. He's riding. He has his armor on. A guy shoots a arrow, and it hits him in between. And it was a random shot. Look, when your time's up, it's up no matter what you do.
Yeah, God's calling you home. That's your time.
100%. You have a news item.
Speaking of which, it's actually very sad. The Times of Israel and several other outlets have reported that a 96-year-old Holocaust survivor, Steve, that lived in Kharkiv, his name was Boris Romanchenko, 96-year-old Holocaust survivor. Shelling hit his apartment complex, and he passed away. And he actually, as a Holocaust survivor, spent a lot of his life talking about the atrocities that took place during the Holocaust. And he also was on the committee for one of the concentration camps. And
he was in multi-camps.
He was in Dora, Bergen-Belsen, and I'm trying to remember the other one that he was in. It's in the news spot that I put on there, but he talked about those and did education. And here it's just sad to see that he would speak about a day of peace and love and unity and harmony, apart from the experience that he had in the Holocaust. And now all of a sudden, he was taken by this monster, Putin, a monster who's almost redoing exactly what Hitler had done in Poland and Ukraine and moving into those areas. So
this is really devastating news, but it only is symbolic of what's really taking place on the ground in the Ukraine. Jewish blood and Gentile blood it's the same. It's human blood. Jewish people are God's chosen people, but when a person dies from war, it's always tragic. But it makes this more tragic after going 96 years, going through 3 different camps, surviving the Holocaust, one of the, if not the worst thing in the 20th century, and then having to die, as you said, through a awful Putin who, to me, he gives me just a little taste of what the Antichrist will be like. Merciless, ongoing, never stopping, focused on the tyranny that he has. It's just awful, and to have that happen is just awful.
This isn't in our show notes. Okay, so we, guys,
that'll be a first for us to go off message.
You're being sarcastic.
Of course I am.
Just so everyone knows, we have show notes, but sometimes we can go down rabbit holes here. Zelensky's been speaking he spoke to the United States and
Knesset.
And he spoke to the Knesset in the United States. He definitely used a lot of American history. Used the words of certain presidents to touch at the heartstrings of the American people in his speech to our Congress, and then he spoke to the Knesset, and there's some backlash to his message to the Knesset because he invoked the final solution to the Ukrainians, and that touched a lot of the heartstrings of the Israeli legislators, the Israeli Congress, if you will, the parliament there. I'm interested in your thoughts on what he did. Do you think it was wrong for him to use those words and connect them to the Holocaust?
It's very acceptable today. Holocaust is used all the time. Nazis are used. The word it's to try to equate things to the Holocaust is difficult. In this case, you have a Jewish president of the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Who in his own DNA, his own relatives, has Holocaust relations. That is, family members, who obviously he's too young to have met them, but he knows about them, died simply because they were Jewish. On the other hand, you have Putin, who is coming in, seemingly it would have been, in fact, what did President Biden call it early on, an incursion, a small incursion or something. A small incursion. Yet, hey, the people are fighting for their country. They're fighting for freedom. And as a result of that, Putin is willing to kill everyone around. It can seem to him like a Holocaust. Talk to the Ukrainians, where they're bombing indiscriminately. They're hospitals, schools. That is the way Hitler was. Yeah. So I don't resent it. I understand. I think you have to take each case because in our country, I have heard...
we use it all over the place.
For things that aren't even... Yeah. No one's dying from some of the examples they use. Here, at least, you can make a case for it.
Yeah.
A strong case, not just for the acts done, but by the leader who himself is Jewish. I think that gives it a little credibility.
A little more cachet when he says it there.
Yeah.
That's interesting, Steve. We have one more piece for us.
We do. And Chris, this is intifada. Explain to us, when I say the word intifada, what comes to your mind?
I mean, I always think of it more as a holy war. In some sense, that it's a justifiable act of terrorism in defense of something that you believe in, and it's connected specifically to the radical Islamic faith.
Against whom?
Against an enemy, or they were using against Israel.
Okay.
But for them, it was somebody. So
when you hear the word intifada, at least in our context, you think of the suicide bombers. You think of this desire to pick off Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's an article, Globalizing the Intifada. And the first line to the article, which is in wopalestine.com, and it says this: as Palestinians continue to bravely confront ethnic cleansing and genocide. Chris, do we have any news items of Palestinians getting picked off by Israel by wiping them out, cleansing them?
There is no, in fact, if I remember correctly, the statistics actually say that the Palestinians have been growing. The population has been growing, not decreasing.
And so there's this whole website, as I said, wopalestine.com, and there's a checklist. This is a non-comprehensive list, it says, of what you may need at a rally. So this is
this is all in America.
Yep.
And this is in order to do a rally against Israel.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Get a Facebook page, flyers, tell you how to make the flyer, a blurb, a standard blurb for people to put on social media, co-sponsor with allied orgs, contact legal observers, write a press release, organize a press conference, have a point media person, create security plan for those that attend the rally to ensure their safety, particularly from Zionist disruptors.
Which there never are.
I've never even heard of a Zionist disruptor. And be prepared to go to jail. Support in case of any protesters are arrested. Well, why would the protesters be arrested in America? Because they were doing something illegal.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
You're allowed to protest. In fact, in America during COVID, you were allowed to protest certain things with almost immunity.
Yeah. And this is always where that fine line, because for our listeners, there's two words that we can use here: anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. Anti-Zionism is the hatred of Israel. Anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jewish people. And there are a lot of people that go, oh, I can be an anti-Zionist. I can hate Israel as a country. That doesn't make me an anti-Semite. That doesn't make me an anti-Semite, part of the anti-Semitism or to hate Jewish people. It's different. And what's always interesting is that anti-Zionism, which is what this intifada seems like it's doing, it's trying to promote an anti-Israel sentiment. It always boils over into anti-Semitism.
100%. And Chris, let me ask this question. If there was no Israel, where would the Jewish Ukrainians go?
Exactly.
They would have no place to go. It's the only Jewish country in the whole world. It's the only one. There are countries where people are accepted all over the place. But because anti-Semitism is worldwide and because it's been a nonstop thing, the difference between the Holocaust and that man, look, he went to Ukraine. He went to Ukraine. It doesn't mean if you go to Israel, you won't die. You of course you can. But there's a safe place for those Ukrainians today. And Israel's gearing up for 75,000 Ukrainian Jewish people. There's a place to go finally. And the folks here don't want them to have a place like that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, too, because when you think about the Holocaust, they had nowhere to go. I mean, there was literally nowhere for Jewish people to go. 6 million Jewish people died in the Holocaust. Those refugees who fled, America wasn't letting them in. Just a small group, not many. Europe was sticking them in displaced persons camps. They couldn't even go down to British Palestine. They couldn't go down to the Mandate Palestine, in the 1945, 1946, because there was the white paper situation. They weren't letting Jewish people, even though they were survivors of the Holocaust. The moment they'd land, they'd ship them to Cyprus and stick them in displaced person camps. They'd end up back in a prison. And some of them even ended up back in Germany again, or back in, the place of their nightmares. And so, like you said, Steve, now we're in a different situation where we have workers and Friends of Israel that are getting Jewish people. They're boarding them on buses and taking them to Romania, taking them to Poland, so that they could ultimately make Aliyah to Israel, to to the Jewish homeland.
A safe place. We just talked to Menno Kalisher this morning, who told us that his church, his local fellowship, is helping to sponsor Ukrainians who are going to Spain, and the church is helping them to get out and to. So there are. It's an amazing thing to see, and it's it's interesting.
It's very interesting. All right, well, Steve, we're going to transition here because we've been kind of talking about some sad things happening in the news, but I want us to talk about something good, which is our.
All right, I love that music.
Isn't that great music?
Love that music.
Changes the dynamic.
Yep, we've been talking about depressing things. Let's talk about something nice.
Well, you've got a great Yiddish word of the day, Steve, so why don't you take it away?
All right, well, Chris, we were reading chapter 3 of Ruth, and in chapter 3 of Ruth, we have Boaz talking to Ruth, and he sees this gal, and he says, hey, blessed are you, Ruth, because you could have gone after younger men, but instead you're here. And so if he could speak Yiddish, he would have said, what a Mechayeh. This is a Mechayeh. And a Mechayeh means a joy, a delight. You gave the example, Chris. Why don't you share the example you gave? Because it was part of my life. I grew up with no air conditioning in our house. And in the summer, when it's 90 degrees, tell us.
Yeah, okay, so it says, a Mechayeh, if you walk into an air-conditioned room or taste ice water on a hot day, you might say, what a Mechayeh, meaning literally something that has brought you back from death to life, a colloquially, something relieving or refreshing, a Mechayeh.
Wouldn't you say Boaz was refreshed when he found, hey, who is this? This is Ruth.
Yes.
I got a shot. There's a guy closer, but I got a shot. This could be good.
Boaz was Ruth was a Mechayeh to Boaz.
100%. But not only to Boaz. Who else was she a Mechayeh to?
To Naomi.
100%?
Yes.
She was a double Mechayeh.
She was all over the place, Mechayeh. A great word. You talked about using Mechayeh too growing up, and you would say, just like you said, when you'd walk into an air-conditioned room, you would hear that.
All the time. You could hear it all the time. Jewish people that I knew in my neighborhood, whenever there was a joy, a delight, it was, you hear, what a Mechayeh.
That's good.
It's really like saying, what a blessing.
Yeah. Well, listen, this episode has been a blessing to me. We're in our new podcast room, and I'm learning the ropes here too, Steve. So we
got new equipment, Chris. We're getting high society.
We are moving up in the world here when it comes to the Jew and Gentile podcast. So I'm learning the ropes. I'm learning new things here. So thank you so much for your patience as we do this. You know, the Jew and Gentile podcast, Steve, I can't say this enough. It's sponsored by FOI Equip.
We love FOI Equip.
That's right. If you're interested in studying the Bible from a Jewish perspective, then you need to go to foiequip.org. Don't waste time. Now that the show's over, go, please. Maybe you're on your phone. Maybe you're on your computer. Maybe you're on your tablet. Go to foiequip.org, and there you can sign up for our classes. You can sign up for our newsletter and receive information about upcoming events. You can even join one of our internships, our Bridges internship program. There's so much that you can do with Friends of Israel. We want you to be a part of all that we're doing here.
And how much does this cost, Chris?
This?
How much does
the whole FOI Equip? Oh, it's free. Steve, it's free.
Such a deal.
Such a deal. Hey, go to foiequip.org. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next week.